would like to welcome everyone. Before we get started into the formal portion, we'd like to acknowledge we lost an important member of not only the warbird community, but a World War II and a D-Day veteran about 3 weeks ago. So Bud Anderson was a Triple Ace, 357th fighter group over fighting out of England. They were called the Oxford Boys. He was one of the highest scoring aces of that fighter group. After the war, he finished a career in what became the Air Force, from the Army Air Force to the Air Force. Retired in the early 70s. He went on to be a very popular speaker at aviation and military events. And he passed about 3 weeks ago at the ripe age of 102. So here's his trusty steed. He had several of them, P-51s primarily. He named them Old Crow because that was a popular whiskey of the day. And is Tom Newhart in the crowd? Well, we had our Mustang. We had a Mustang here called Van War a couple years back. And we had it up at the Truckee Show in 2019. And Bud was there giving a speech. He lived just downhill outside Sacramento. And that's Tom. He's one of us. He had this brilliant idea, and he got Bud to come by and say hello. He signed one of the panels on the inside of the Mustang. We gave him a shirt. He was a very generous man giving up his time. So rest in peace. Oh, I really like this. So this is a couple years back. He was promoted to an honorary brigadier general. He's 100 years old, sitting right there. I flew with this gentleman, C.Q. Brown. Now, he was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He is now the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Ooh. And from my time, he was a great fighter pilot. He was a great human being, a great officer. And so what I liked, it's hard to see the photo, when you look at his expression, he is just honored to be there standing next to that man, to Bud Anderson. Okay, here's what we got for you today. We're going to talk, we've got a thread. We're going to honor and pay homage to the grunts, the infantrymen who carried the day of D-Day. But we are an air museum, so we're going to focus a little bit on air power and air power's impact before and on D-Day. So that'll be a thread, air power, medium bombers, because they were stars of the day, D-Day. And we're also going to talk about connections. And that, by what I mean there, is the connections of some of us today in the 2000s and our connections to this event 80 years ago. So we'll kind of work through leading up to and Operation Overlord. We'll talk about medium bombers, and we have one right out here that we can go take a look at afterwards. And so we're going to talk about our medium bomber, our PBJ, which we're proud of. We're going to talk about the history of that airplane, and that's when we're going to start about connections. We have a gentleman here who was on the tour back several years ago and talked and saw and photoed and videoed the connections that this kind of airplane today had with the veterans. Then we'll talk about our D-Day. A couple of us right here and myself are going to share some stories about our connections to this day with that event 80 years ago. Then some Q&A. We've got a great display up here from Charlie. We've got ramp displays that we can go take a look at. And then as long as weather allows, about 1:30, we're going to fly that medium bomber. We've got some rides scheduled, and we're going to go do the thing. Hey, a quick follow-up report. So last month, our presentation, this young man came down and talked about connections. So he was very close with his grandfather, who was a World War II veteran. And through his experience there, this young man, who's an independent filmmaker, wanted to connect to his grandfather's World War II experience. And gave a great presentation. While he was here, we had some damaged Hellcat propeller blades. And so we gave him one. And that propeller blade that we offered to him has already been put to great use. That's the last surviving Battle of Midway veteran. And George got some photos with Mr. Payne, who's now 100 years old. So good work's being done by a lot of us here in the museum. So here we go. In the documentary World War II Witness to War, military historian Lynette Nussbacher called D-Day the largest enterprise ever undertaken by human beings. Wow. Wow. Okay, so where did it start? It's hard to pinpoint, a date or a day or a month, because from very early in the war, especially our involvement in the war, kind of a Germany first policy, it was almost a known that we were going to eventually have to invade Europe if we were going to defeat Germany. But when you talk about specifics, all right, let's really start planning on that. The Casablanca Conference, which was at the time just Roosevelt and Churchill, plus all their military staff, they said, okay, we need to start building up our forces in England for this cross-channel. They had already talked about a strategic bomber offensive, but they came up with Operation Poignant, which was a combined bomber offensive, a little bit of a subset of the broader strategic bomber campaign against Germany. And then a subset of that was Operation Jackpot, which, we need to focus on the Luftwaffe and their fighters and their medium bombers to make D-Day possible. Okay, so there you can see in March of 1943, under the direction of the British Lieutenant General Morgan, they started planning, March of 43. And then in the Taifun conference, where now Stalin is able to join the group, so there's the first Big Three meeting, they set the date. And notice it's May. May of 44 was the initial date, May 1st, and now planning can really start getting focused. Here's the Atlantic convoy, right? So by this time, the Battle of the Atlantic and the U-boats, we kind of get the upper hand on that. But look at this, I think, right? 7 million tons of stuff sent to England from the United States. So here's that point blank. Again, a subset of the overall strategic bombing agreed upon by the military chiefs there at Casablanca. It was intended to cripple and destroy the German fighter strength. Began in mid-43. You can see there the intent was to eliminate the Luftwaffe as a barrier to a successful cross-channel invasion. You can see the highest priority target is fighter aircraft. And then talk about the right guy in the right place, Doolittle, right? What a hero for us everywhere. So by this time, he's a major general, I think, and he's running one of the air forces in the Mediterranean. He gets called into Europe. And one of the first things he does is say, hey, I want to detach the fighters from the bombers. We now have enough fighters, thanks to production, that we can do both. We can keep some of the fighters close to the bombers to protect them, defensive. But now I have enough to go offensive. And go find the Luftwaffe. Don't let them come to you. Go find them and kill them. Offensive. Jackpot. So it flowed from, and it followed point blank. Further focusing now on northern France, not just all of France and Germany, but focusing more on northern France, where D-Day is going to occur. Started in mid-April, so they had about a month and a half to 2 months to get to it. And they wanted to get those German fighters in the air. They wanted to destroy the Luftwaffe's ability to impede D-Day. And remember, Doolittle said he took the chains off the fighters. Go get them. Don't wait till them coming to you to attack the bombers. Go find them and kill them. Main targets, initially the Luftwaffe airfields. They expanded them. There was a big, I don't want to say controversy, but in the bomber world there, what do we bomb? Oil or transportation? And Eisenhower decided we're going to do transportation to prevent the Germans from reinforcing and coming towards the beachheads to impede the success of the landing. So they expanded to help some of the railways, locomotives. We've all seen photos of fighters straightening trains. We were going to stop the ability of the German Wehrmacht to come and counterattack. Okay, so what were the results of point blank and jackpot? Well, they did achieve local air superiority over the beaches. The Luftwaffe was unable to do two huge things: observe the buildup and then counteract the actual landings. Okay, little Luftwaffe fighter opposition. So huge. Look at these are our losses to the fighters, cut in half. And this is German General of the Fighters, DeLong, very well known, and you can see he made this comment about that change from defend the bombers, our change. Leave our fighters close to the bombers, and that's the change to go offensive, and let's go find them. So that was the air war before D-Day. Now here's, as we're continuing to prepare for it, there was a huge deception plan. And it started a year prior. And it included, you can see the one that, the part of it that directly affected D-Day in the Normandy landings was called Fortitude South. There was a Fortitude North. All deception, making the Germans, hopefully making the Germans think, hey, we're going to invade Norway. So now the Germans have got a lot to think about. Where are they coming? They know we're coming. But where are we going to come? Right? We wanted to enforce the belief in the German High Command that for the European, we were going to come at the shortest part, right? There's London. The Pas de Calais there is the shortest distance across the English Channel. So that's where our deception plan was focused. Way down here is London. We had dummy equipment. Those are dummy landing craft. And I'm joking here, but we think so much about the Brits, but we didn't know that the Brits were immensely powerful people and able to lift a tank. It's a big balloon. It's fake. Right? We know. So I made a joke about the Normandy weapon. So and we went back. Remember, the first official day of D-Day was the 1st of May. Well, we got the Mediterranean going on, right? Italy, Anzio. What's happening in the Pacific? Oh my word. There's a whole other cataclysmic war going on in the Pacific. And the key thing was landing craft. So Eisenhower was able to get D-Day postponed by about a month to the end of June, just so they could get more landing craft to support this massive thing. And then what they really needed, what the planners really wanted, their major factors were we need to have the right tide to do an amphibious landing, and we need something to do. We don't want full moon, we don't want no moon. We have to have sunlight, primarily for those paratroopers that are coming. So they slid it from the end of May to that first week in June. And on the 4th of June, the forecast for the 5th of June was bad. So they canceled it one day, postponed it one day, and hence we've arrived at the 6th of June. So you heard what this historian said. Not just the largest amphibious invasion in military history, still to this day, but the largest enterprise in terms of manpower and equipment with one focus, the largest enterprise ever. So look at those numbers. Over 150,000 troops, a fair number airborne, either paratroopers or glider borne, almost 7,000 ships and landing vessels, 12,000 airplanes, including 800 plus C-47s, which carried the paratroopers, and a nearly equivalent number of gliders, which those C-47s towed. And there's what the invasion, one picture of many of what the invasion fleet looked like. Operation Neptune was a subset of Overlord. We have to get the people there. Talk about a massive naval operation. So people coming, men and equipment coming from all over the south of England. They go to Piccadilly Circus. They get in their nice little lines, and now they start steaming towards their respective beaches. And you can see the British airborne troops and the American airborne troops, commanded by a British admiral, Operation Neptune. And now we get to the start of this longest day. Starts with paratroopers. Their responsibility, they were dropped on the flanks of the 5 beaches. The Americans in the west, the British and Canadians in the east. And you can see what they wanted to do. They wanted to secure those flanks. They wanted to stop access, German counterattack access to those beaches, and if necessary, secure or destroy the bridges, keep bridges over rivers and canals. There's a picture of a C-47 that carried the paratroopers. Yep, lots of them. And there's a good picture of a glider, which were used to bring in additional troops and resupply, and were expendable. You land, half of them crashed on landing, and then just leave them. We'll clean up afterwards. And if you can see it, that's crowded sky. So here's some already on the ground, gliders. There's a glider being towed by someone off the picture. There's a C-47 pulling the glider. That's almost another Battle of Britain right there, all friendlies. They have been tracking the T-Day Squadron. This is a modern day effort by a whole bunch of museums or private owners who have C-47s, and they're back over there right now. They did it 5 years ago for the 75th anniversary. They rejoined, the American ones rejoined in New England and flew what was called the Blue Spruce route. That's how we ferried a whole bunch of aircraft up through Greenland and Iceland and down through Scotland and into theater. They followed that same path. And so where they're at right now, they did some jumps into Cherbourg. And so we're right here in this 3 to 9. They're doing Normandy events and they're jumping simulated paratroopers out. You can follow them up here, T-Day Squadron up. So here's what the beaches look like. And I hope this one, there are so many pictures and schematics and drawings of what it looked like. This one I thought was simple enough. Didn't have all the Army lines, because the Army divides up everything in lines all over and squares, and what does 5 X's mean and 4 X's. I thought this was simple, right? And don't forget, Operation Neptune got everyone. So here are the American paratroopers. There's Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Swart. And right down here, if you can barely see them, there are the British paratroopers. Again, you can see they're on the flanks of the beaches. So what happened at Utah? Okay, the U.S. 4th Infantry Division, supported by those airborne troops, 0630, who defended the area, the 709th Infantry Division from the Germans. Their objectives were the 4 causeways that left the beaches or fed the beaches. And that area was flooded by the Germans. Okay, the challenges were the paratroopers who were supposed to support them were scattered all over that peninsula to the west of Utah Beach. By the end of the day, they did have a small beachhead that they called secure. They had isolated link-ups with the paratroopers, some but not all. They were resupplied, so the gliders really earned their keep by resupplying the 4th Infantry Division. And you know, it's hard to pinpoint numbers, but about 3,000 casualties, about 1,000 KIA that one day on that one beach for that one landing zone. Omaha, the 1st and 29th U.S. Divisions at about the same time. They had to face the crack 352nd Division of the German Army. They were to secure, you see this main road? That's about 3 miles inland. That's what their objective was. And the U.S. Rangers were to secure Point du Hoc. How many people have not heard of Point du Hoc? Good, because that was critical. Big German guns on that could influence and affect not only the shipping, but the beaches as well. So the Rangers had to scale that cliff and take out those guns. That was tough going on Omaha Beach. It was a very wide, I've heard 300 yards, there's no cover, and you had to run across it. The Germans had the high ground. It was one of their crack units, so highly experienced, well dug in positions, batteries, all that stuff. Fierce German resistance. Okay, they had amphibious tanks planned, and most of those, which would have supported the troops, sank, so were of no use to the ground troops. The heavy bombers, they did their work earlier, but with those low clouds, the heavy bombers were missing their targets. They didn't want to drop on friendlies. They knew we had ground troops on the beaches, so boy, you delay letting those bombs go 3 seconds, and your bombs are way long when you're dropping from 20,000 feet. Okay, the Navy destroyers, we'll talk about them. They really help save the day. So these destroyers are going into shallow water, which means now they're a target. They're exposing themselves to German fire. And they started pumping these 5-inch guns into the German positions. End of the day, the beachhead was not secure, right? They were still getting shelled by German artillery. They wanted to go 3 miles inland, they got about a mile. More casualties, close to the same number of KIAs. Very famous photo, kind of encapsulates everything about Omaha Beach. Robert Capa's photo. So Arash, who you're going to hear pretty soon, said he read Robert Capa's book. And Capa's photograph was clear. But in producing it, remember this is 1944, and developing film back then just didn't go really well, so it was blurry. They kept it because it captures the essence of the chaos on Omaha Beach. Okay, going to gold, so this is now the Commonwealth. Okay, the British 50th Infantry, roughly an hour after the Americans land, they have parts of that same crack 352nd and another infantry division. They were to capture a really important ridge line. They were to advance inland toward Bayou, if I say that correctly, which is on that main road that the folks at Omaha wanted to capture. And then they wanted to link up with Juneau to their east and Omaha to their west. Some of the challenges, they had the same thing. So those heavy bombers just didn't want to drop on time. You wait 5 seconds and your bombs are long and don't help. So they also faced heavy German resistance. And what you'll see about the Commonwealth beaches, as opposed to this 300-yard wide beach in Omaha, the beaches on the Commonwealth, those units are very narrow, and there's buildings right there. So you put a German machine gun in that building, and they're shooting point blank into these guys coming off the landing. heavy German resistance. Though they were short of their objectives, they did have a large beachhead that they said is secure. Okay, look at these supplies that they were able to unload. This is in one day. About 1,000 casualties, not quite the KIA that we've seen on the American beaches. Juno, the next one going east. Canadians now. Canadians were in the middle. Okay, German 716th. They were to secure that road, secure the high ground on the west side of Con, and again, just like on Gold, link up with the beaches on either side of it. The challenges, this is what I meant to say on the other one. When the buildings are just right there, when they get out of the landing craft, there's somebody who's 20 yards that way in the building shooting at them. So that was really tough. And just like on Omaha, the amphibious tanks that they had were delayed. Heavy surf, launched too close in so they stayed too long on the landing craft before the tank rolled off to try and support the infantry. They got 6 miles inland, so they reached an objective, and about 1,200 casualties. But from the sources I looked at, they couldn't pinpoint KIA. Just a number of these things. And then the last one, Sword, the British 3rd Infantry. Again, they're on the flanks, so they're supported by airborne. They were up against in addition to a couple infantry divisions, a Panzer division of tanks. They had some really heavy objectives, right? Needed to capture a bridge in a canal. They had to, just like at Point du Hoc on the west, they had a really important gun battery, German gun battery at Merville that could really influence the beaches and the shipping. And they were supposed to reach Con, 11 miles inland. Same kind of challenge. They're getting off the landing craft and there were buildings with German machine guns in them 20 yards away. And they had to fight through that. They did get a beachhead, a deep one, secured. They took the gun battery, that was critical. Their airborne troops did yeoman work and were able to seize and hold their objectives. They also had a fair number of casualties. I mentioned naval gunfire support a little bit. The pre-bombardment, there were 7 battleships, here's the Nevada, one of them, that pounded things. But as we see so often, and if you're schooled on the Pacific theater and all those pre-invasion bombardments, they're not as effective as you would think. And it's the poor infantry grunt who really got to do the hard work. Hold that thought when we get to medium bombers and G-Day. So the heavy firepower certainly was helpful, but it was the tin cannons, the destroyers, who go into super shallow water, turn broadside, which means they're a target, and start firing their 5-inch guns from a Navy perspective, point blank, into the batteries and the mortars of the Germans. Yeoman work. I have read where these destroyers helped save Omaha Beach because they took out those things that the heavy bombers didn't, because they were long on their targets, and the tanks sank, and it was the Navy destroyers who picked up the slack. Airplane, yeah, there was a huge airplane. Okay, so you can see, here's Operation Neptune, there's the beaches, and here's this ring, and inside there is Allied air power, primarily fighters. 3-phase plan, all focused on destroying the Luftwaffe and keeping the German ground troops from reinforcing what was there and pushing us back into the sea. Still the largest aerial operation in history. We kind of hit these numbers. 12,000 aircraft, 14,000 stories. So here's a B-26 medium bomber. That's one of the British beaches. Here's A-20s, medium bomber. There's Point du Hoc. So here's some of the stars of the day. So this is my opinion not any formal historian, but my opinion, before D-Day, the fighters and the heavy bombers did a magnificent job. I got a slide up here that will enforce that. The day of, there was low cloud cover, so we talked about the heavy bombers. They were less effective in supporting the ground troops on the beach right now. And the fighters were limited as well with that cloud cover. So who was it who went in there and helped the ground troops below the weather? The medium bombers. Aerial stars of the day. So here are the main ones. There's an A-20. Here's a B-25. It's in green because we have a Marine Corps version right out here on the ramp for you to go look at and listen to here in a couple hours. Okay, so they went in, they attacked the things that the troops really needed. The heavy coastal guns, the batteries that were missed, no tanks, no heavy bomber support, and these artillery, German artillery, are just tearing up the beaches. And it's the medium bombers who go in below the weather and help them out, in addition to those Navy craft. The fighters, yeah, they were there doing their thing. So there was almost no Luftwaffe opposition. Some of that due to Operation Point Blank and Jackpot, but also a lot of it due to the airplane. And there are Allied fighters, Spitfires in green. We have a Mark 14 right out here for you to take a look at. They were keeping Luftwaffe off. They were doing cover sweep. They were also doing a little interdiction. Their versatility, being a fighter bomber, multi-role, really shine. You could go drop bombs on those trains we talked about, and then jump up a little higher and engage a German fighter in air-to-air combat. There were Spitfire Mark 14s, just like the Mark we have out here. 3 squadrons. You saw an earlier photo getting painted with the D-Day invasion stripes, and they were doing top cover. So we had Spitfire Mark 14s over the beaches on D-Day, doing primarily fighter air superiority and top cover, and also for those that were able to get below the weather, looking for German Navy fast attack boats or whatever, trying to come in and disrupt this thing. So, how well did Point Blank and Jackpot work? This is the assessment of the relative Allied air power versus Luftwaffe air power on D-Day. I would think the heavy bombers and the fighters should be applauded for what they did. Looked pretty daunting to me if you're this guy. All right, costly but successful. So of the 5 beaches, 4 were pretty much considered secured, but Omaha was still tenuous. Like I mentioned, they were getting shelled, still getting shelled by German artillery. A whole bunch of people, 132,000 troops in one day landed. 200, I still don't believe that, 200,000 vehicles. Okay, a lot of casualties. Roughly 4,400 killed in action on one day. You can see from the previous slide, somewhat got their objectives. They were a little short in Omaha, tough going there. The British got inland further, achieved more of their objectives. So according to the internet, this is a photo taken on D-Day, later on D-Day, but on D-Day, to show the logistics and the planning, and boy, we have to support these troops, however far they go in. We have to support them right now. We have to supply them. Look at this. This is just incredible. Long way. And the aftermath. So what did D-Day lead to? Well, within about a month and a half, tough goal, but we break out of Normandy. Another month, we liberate Paris. Whatever that is, 6 or 7 months, and we cross the Rhine into Germany. Another month, the end of April, we link up with the Red Army down here southwest of Berlin, and then early major reserves. Largest, what did she say? Largest enterprise ever. All right, so here's one of my threads. Hang in there with me. We're about to go into the Pacific, but what's the thread? It's a medium bomber. Who were, in my opinion, the stars of the day as far as air power on D-Day, medium bombers. Okay, there were, as I mentioned, there were P-25s, which became PBJs in some instances, in service, fighting over those beaches on D-Day, really earning their stripes. For the B-25, RAF had them via Lend-Lease, so a lot of those, they were doing their low and medium altitude attacks, supporting the British and Canadian beachheads. How did the B-25 lead to a PBJ? Well, in 42, so a couple of years before D-Day, there was an inter-service agreement. The Navy, primarily the Marine Corps, said we could use some medium bombers, and we need this. And the Army Air Force, well, we need engines. We need B-29 engines. So give us all of your B-29 engines, Navy, and we'll give you some B-25s, and your Marine Corps can use it. Okay. And then first started arriving in February of 43, and pretty much all of them went to Marine Corps units and were used as land-based medium bombers. So what did the Marine Corps do to them? The main thing they did was they put radar. And boy, that's another addition, but it worked. And here's the later one. They put, nascent air-to-air radar. Radar's pretty young in the term of technology anyway. To put it on an airplane was even another step. So they put them on the airplane, and then they started messing with ordnance to meet their missions. Primary targets, they did heckling missions when we bypassed islands, and we start island hopping, commerce, and the Imperial Japanese Navy recently. They also heavily hit airfields, communications, and the airfields were lucrative targets. They did level bombing, just like you saw from, who's seen Masters of the Air? Yeah, so the heavy bombers, mass formations dropping. They did that too, level bombing. There's a typical bomb, 250 pounds. They also did low-level bombing. They did skip bombing. So you can't see the bomb, but the airplane has released the bomb, and it's going to skip off the water and slam into the side of the ship. Very effective. So I'm not sure if that's a bomb. I'm going to say it is, but that is definitely a bomb that's about to skip off the water. Typically 500 to 1,000 pounders, general purpose bombs. They do not have a fuse in the nose. They want it to skip off the water. They also shot rockets. And how's that for breathing? Some of the models, they put 8 guns in the nose. They had 2 on each side, and then this is the top turret that could be moved forward. It could be 14, 50 cal shooting at you. They also dropped parafrag bombs. Low altitude, deadly. So here's the tactics. So here comes a 9 ship in. They're going to do an in-place turn, which means everyone turns at the same time. They start their turn. Now they're all line abreast, and each one of them has upwards of 14 50 cal machine guns. And what happens when they overfly? Here come a whole ton of parafrag bombs. And what's next? They're squadron mates. Here we come again. Okay, some specifications. Big, pretty fast, long range, whole bunch of bombs. Yeah, a whole bunch of machine guns, 3,000 pounds of bomb, could also carry a torpedo. Almost 10,000 built, and about 700 to 800 went to the Navy and the Marine Corps. Okay, enough listening to me. What we're going to do now, Mike Hodson's going to get up, and he's going to give you a history of our airplane.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'd like to give a round of applause for going off of the presentation. The amount of time we spent preparing this, literally weeks, hours and hours late into the night, just planning on this and researching slides and putting together the narrative and working with us. And it's amazing. He does a masterful job, so I hope everybody appreciates that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our aircraft. We have out on the ramp a PBJ 1J. It's actually marked as a North American B-25 because that's what it started its life as. It was constructed as a B-25J. Kansas City, as Bob said, about 10,000 B-25s built. About 700 went to the Navy as PBJs. So the question is, what does PBJ stand for? Not the sandwich. No, it's PB for patrol bomber, J for the manufacturer, North American. So it's a North American patrol bomber. So our bomber was taken on service March of 1945, transferred directly to the Navy, and got a Navy bureau number, as they all did. In March of 45, went to Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Converted to a PBJ. They put racks for torpedoes, depth charges, etc. on the aircraft. Heavyweight mounts added, 1150 caliber machine guns, and went to the U.S. Marine Corps Service Squadron 81 in May of 45. So this is a period photograph of a PBJ, not ours, but a PBJ in country. You can see obviously in the jungle, in the Philippine Islands in 1945, so pretty rugged conditions, pretty primitive, nice hangars to work in, or shelter in, whatever, just really grim, primitive, just we're fighting a war, it's not pretty, it's not fun, it's not comfortable. So in 1945, was transferred to the Special Weapons Division in Pennsylvania. They tested out a new rocket delivery system on the aircraft, and then 28th of February 47, went to the War Assets Administration for disposal, which means when you get rid of this airplane, the war's over. We've got way too many airplanes, we need to get rid of them. So it struck off strength, in March of 1947. So went through a number of different private owners after the Navy was declared surplus. St. Louis Line Service had it. Between 1948 and 1981, 12 different owners. They were using it for executive transport. Texas Instruments was an owner. They were doing electronics testing. A lot of different missions for this airplane. So here it was with a company in Houston, and you can see that the airplane has a airliner type air stair door in it. So the people, they were transporting executives around in the southern part of the United States. So the guys could get in and out without going through the hatches. They had a nice airliner style air stair door to get in and out of it. So not really comfortable, but it was fast and carry a lot, and it was okay. And then 1981, the airplane was restored in Florida. 1985 went to, at that time, dare I say the word, Confederate Air Force, not the Commemorative Air Force. And came to CAF Southern California in 1993. It's been here ever since. Here it is coming to Southern California. We went and looked at it in Harlingen, Texas. We did an inspection, realized that the airplane had some pretty significant corrosion, especially in one of the wings. So we flew a spare wing back to Harlingen in our C-46 Commando, which you can see here. We actually built a plywood mock-up of the wing to find out if we could get it in through the cargo door to fit. We said, okay, we're going to fly the C-46 to Texas with the spare wing, mount the wing on the airplane, fly it home, and we take the spare wing off, take it back to Chino, and look at the airplane. We started looking at it. It was rode hard, put away wet for many years. Needed everything. So we started that process. This is a picture of when we had most of the fuselage, top fuselage skin off of the airplane. I've been told that 80% of the skin that you see out on the ramp here is new. Those guys have spent months and years reskinning the airplane. 23 years of restoration we put into the airplane. You can see here it is it was in the next hangar, it was in the maintenance hangar. This is where it was getting ready for some paint. And then here it is on the ramp, ready for its first flight. First flight, May 15th, 2016. We've been flying it now for a little over 8 years. We do ride flights. Anybody that wants to go for a PBJ ride, we can help you out with that. Get your credit card out and we'll give you the ride of a lifetime. It's pretty amazing. So, next up, Arash. He's got some connections.
That's the sound of 24 Wright engines warming up for takeoff, and I've never experienced anything quite as exhilarating since. My name is Storch. I had the pleasure of being a member here for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, and had an unexpected additional pleasure of participating in the flight we did for the 75th commemoration of the WWII to the airport in Taifun. Way back there in the far right corner, we didn't know what the previous one. That's the path we took. All the legs on the flight over to the commemoration flight back. And the reason I point that out is that this experience was very different than anything I had ever experienced, or probably most of you have experienced when going to air shows. I spent hot, sunny afternoon there in the grass, most of the time hoping nobody would show up to make me move. So I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there, and as I saw the grass day starting to grow, I started to think, why didn't somebody show up to make me move? A little bit more excitement than I had bargained for. And that was going to be my point. A lot of folks who show up at air shows, that's what they're after. They're excited. They like that American muscle and might and power, and nothing wrong with that. We would love more of it. But some of those folks, it could be bombers, or it could be a Mustang. It doesn't get the car Mustang. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's a chance to look at something cool, feel something great, and maybe have a nice beer or something, and then get a good sunburn and go home. When you're on a flight like this, everything stops by yourself, a solo flight in the PBJ, which, before I forget, I'm going to mention, if you can afford it, you should take a ride with it, because for reasons which will become clear in a minute, I hope it won't be something you'll soon forget. But when you're a solo flight, going these long stretches, you learn a few things. One thing I learned was to never eat before I get on board. But the folks who showed up to welcome us were there for a very specific reason, and it wasn't just to feel the might of American air power from 80 years ago. They would show up because they had a connection with someone in their family or something in their genealogy, or even someone who knew. So we have folks who want to come back and do this. They want to just pose by an aircraft to emulate something that a grandfather, a father, an uncle, or someone, a neighbor did, just be a little bit closer to that person who is important to their life. And then besides just posing to the picture, you see that people who painted on themselves. Why in the world would you do that? Planes are cool. I like them, but I'm not going to get a tattoo of one. And then you find out, well, it means something to them, much more than just the physical attribute of the air.
Yeah, tell me why you have that tattoo.
My grandfather here. He's my hero, and how many hours did you log in your plane?
1,000.
1,000 hours.
On a B-25. What was your position, sir?
Flight engineer.
Smartest one.
That's the first time I rode in the back.
And I got it this. because I wanted a daily reminder that people as strong as my grandparents have survived through so much worse than I've ever been able.
And this is exactly why we do what we do.
So you say, okay, well that was cute, but you know what? She wasn't the only one. There's another one, and then I could have included more pictures. It's not a one-off, it's a pattern. You start to notice a pattern. There's lots of folks who have this deep connection to this part of our history, much more than you and I. And the other part of it is some of the folks who maybe their parents passed away while they were still, before they got to meet them, or at a young age, who didn't get all the stories, all the questions. A lot of these veterans who are back from the horrific things that Rob just described, who don't want to touch it. So we have people who would come back to touch the airplane, to see the airplane, to smell the airplane, because it was a way for them to make that connection or relive a loved one effectively. And this is an example.
My father flew in VMB 433, so it's really special to get a chance to see one flying, to see the paint scheme. He was a top turret gunner.
Top turret gunner.
Yes. Yeah, he was on several islands that they flew from. He was on Green, Emerald. I'm trying to think some of the other islands that he was on. Those were his main two islands. I still have all of his logbooks.
A lot of the veterans that we meet still are very quiet about their experiences
Yes.
in the war.
Yeah, my dad
Did he
would talk
share
about
much?
it a lot.
Yeah.
He would answer my questions,
Yeah.
but it was never anything that he volunteered. But he, at the same time, he was opening up if I asked him about it, which he died when I was a teenager.
So, just an example of many people. And then we met a lot of veterans too, who even now really didn't want to talk. And then, surprisingly to me, there were people who were at the other end of the business. This gentleman talked from, he was a child in Rome, at the receiving end of what the bombers were doing. And you would think, well, first of all, I'd never thought about it. Our bombers flew, and we always lost bad guys, and well and good, they deserved it. And I never thought about the civilians who were there, or maybe even the part of the military, who would want to come back and see these planes close up again. Maybe it's closure, I don't know what it is. But you would think he'd be better. Maybe, and obviously granddaughter back
Some
home.
of the first bombing of Rome in June 44, when the B-25s came over and they bombed the outskirts of Rome. In all previous years, they had never dropped a bomb on Rome, but the Germans had secured the commercial railroad station, and my sister and I were at a mattress not too far from there. As soon as we heard the sirens, we go up on the roof. We want to see all these beautiful shiny planes. And then we kept hearing, start to dive down to this basement, But it was scary and exciting.
We're in the Bombay of B-25, and
It's really hard to edit. And so the stories were always very long, the ones we did want to tell. So thank you for what it is. So there's the ground, the people on the ground. And then on the flight like this, there's still people around who worked on things like that. So it's the other aspect. These things are meaningful to them because they got their fingers dirty and their nails broken building plants. This is us in Kansas when we had arrived there, and there was a group of genuine old World War Riveters there who had helped build these airplanes. And I'm going to let JD, who was with us, talk about it because he did a much better job than I did. Here we are, just important.
hey guys, can you say something about our flight?
We had a wonderful flight from Olathe, Kansas. A little bit of weather this morning when we woke up, and it dissipated and we took off. Skirted some rain showers, just had a nice smooth flight, 600 some odd miles, all the way into Urbana. Beautiful landing right behind another B-25. It's been an awesome trip. You know what? It's so great for us to be able to see the joy that are on these riders' faces. We had yesterday a bona fide Rosie the Riveter, 92 years old, that worked in the North American factory in Kansas City. She flew with us. She worked on those B-25s during World War II, and she just had a smile on her face a mile wide, as every passenger does. It's just so rewarding for us to be able to do that. And, that's what makes this hobby and so enjoyable.
Well, he called it a hobby, but I can tell you from experience, none of the volunteers here consider this a hobby. They certainly put much more time and energy into it than you would do in a hobby. And you know, that maybe wasn't the only one. There was many more. They're really beautiful.
So, do we have some genuine Rosie the Riveters here?
Yeah, we're it.
You're it?
Yeah. I shot her to where in
In that very plane?
And this young man was a riveter too.
These are all riveters.
These are all Rosie the Riveter.
Wow.
Well, it's an honor for us to see you guys. Thank you for coming out.
So, I mean, for me, this would be the whole thing. Talk about it, right? We tend to forget the effort of the home that made the success of our efforts during the war become a success. And maybe they were facing the bullets and the bombs, but their efforts was crucial. And you can see they just probably took a lot of pride in it, and they want to come back and see what they worked on. It was great to meet. Our 290 here, the yellow one, when howling is on, right under the oil tank, there's an inscription in pencil, I forget the lady's name, dated 1956, that she had worked on that airplane. When I saw that back when I was a volunteer here, it just makes the airplanes alive, and maybe that's for you as well. And then luckily, back then, and probably still today, there are veterans who were still around who would come to see us. And they had a whole different reason. When they were there, they didn't want to just see something cool that they had been a part of way back. It became very obvious very fast that they were representative of all their memories and all their comrades and all their friends who some of them didn't come back. And they did that. I mean, you saw earlier two tattooed on the arm photos, and you think, you know, before you know it, you make a collection of these things. And this reaching up and touching the globe and anchor was not staged, and he wasn't the only one who did it. You get a faster assistant. Okay. All right, well, let's hear these gentlemen talk.
Thomas Shields, S-H-I-E-L-D-S,
And what was your rank? Did you serve through the war, through VJ Day?
PFC.
PFC.
Well, most of the time I spent on Guadalcanal. I was in the Raider Battalions, the 4th Marine Regiment. We got the colors that they lost at Bataan and in China. And they made we made the 4th Marine Regiment out of the 4 Raider Battalions.
Wow.
And then we picked up the 22nd Marines after the Marshall Islands and became the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade. And we landed at Guam as a brigade. Then we picked up the 29th Marines that had been on Saipan 10 years and made the 6th Marine Division. And it never was in this country. It formed out there and it disbanded at Tsingtao, China. So it's got a good history.
Were you a PFC after the war too?
Never stayed here.
No?
I was in the hospital at Great Lakes, and when I got out of the hospital, I was out for good.
Now tell me, you said something
This is
about
1945. It's a long time ago.
You said something about laying out panels on the ground.
The panels to identify your front line, we would display those panels, and then our planes knew that everything on the other side of that panel. Can't be gone. Fantastic.
Take it out.
And they got that done for
And
you.
they did.
Oh, Marine Corps. I was joined when I was 17. I did boot camp in San Diego, Camp Pendleton, and then went to Guam, joined the 3rd Division. And turned 18 on the way, preparing to go to Iwo Jima. We didn't know where we were going. And I was there about 30 days. I was the last one still standing on my platoon, B company. I was in the 2nd platoon. And there was a kid about my age in the 3rd platoon, B company. He was the last of his platoon. So out of 2 of us, we were representing about 70 personnel. I don't apologize for staying alive, but I figured I was better to the country alive than dead.
So when he touches the golden anchor there, he said to me, and I honest to God, I still get goosebumps. He says to me, I'm not going to apologize for living, with his words, but I figured I was better off in the country alive than dead. So, and if you couldn't hear him very long because of the wind, D-Day plus 3 on Iwo Jima. So 3 days of waiting aboard for your turn to go into the and then he was the only man standing in his platoon at the end of his day. So not the only live one, but the only man standing, which was still. And then when he was in the hospital from that, like I said, he met another buddy in another platoon. He was the only man standing from his platoon. So 2 survivors. So not only did they go and deal with the horrors of war, which, as you all know, beyond belief, then they have this burden to carry for the rest of their life, the survivors. And to me, that seems like it's more of a sentence than the other. Thank you. I was going to make that point. And that's the other thing, is that these were not men. They became men really fast, but they were kids. For a lot of them, it was the first time they were away from home and dad. I mean, can you imagine? It's just incredible. All right. You know, if you thought that was hard, this one still gives me goosebumps too. And let's just hear what he has to say.
I'm Bob Elliott. I'm 96 years old. I was in the Air Force. I got washed out, so I was in the infantry.
Oh, okay.
And I was in the infantry 14 months in Europe.
You have anything you remember about it that you'd like to share with us?
Well, yeah, you're getting me started. I was
Yes,
one of
sir.
the first ones at Camp Dachau, prison camp. And the ruling was when we took a town, all the residents had to turn in all their weapons and cameras. And this lady came running out with a camera and handed it to me as I was walking through town. And I stuck it in my pocket. Well, about a week or so later, we were in Dachau. And I thought, well, I got this camera. And I looked, sure enough, there were films in it. So I have pictures of the Dachau prison camp. And so if people say to me, it never happened, I say, okay, I'll show you it did happen.
You were there.
Yeah, I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
No idea how to ask you a second question after that.
Well, I now can do it without much problem. I used to would not be able to talk about it at all. I'm sorry. And he asked me if I had nightmares. I used to. I don't anymore. But it's been a long time. But when I first came home, I had problems. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you found peace with it. That's incredible. Folks like me, we can't possibly imagine what that must have been like.
Well, you talk to people about it, and people right there 2 miles away said it never happened. Well, you know, you could smell it almost 2 miles away. The wind was just right. I mean, the odor was terrific. And,
So that's pretty incredible. I mean, you can hear it. You know? Washed out of the airport, infantryman was part of the liberating force at Dachau, not knowing what he was walking into. After that, camera with him, and he got off his, he still had night in 96. He still had night. I was blindsided by that. I didn't know how to go up with that. It stays with me. All right, we're going to wrap it up here, but I want to show this. On those long flights that we took, was nothing to do. I had nothing to do but reflect upon people I had just met and things that had said to me. And look at myself. Looking out the state patch of the PBJ, and notice our shadow getting bigger and smaller as we danced over the clouds with a halo of the reflection of the sun refracts the sun. It was mesmerizing. It almost felt like we were part of the squad. That unseen wingman kind of thing. It was one of the highlights of being on board with our community. And it made me think about all those ways who went over when my brother was young. So a lot of times to reflect on what I had seen. And one last one. There's videos further down this. I'm not going to show because we have time, but there were also a lot of veterans who came who weren't part of the shooting war. Between the wars, World War II and Korea War, whose task it was for training for other services. And that ended on a high note. And listen to this man. He didn't want his story told. So a lot of it was on audio only. So there'll be a bit where it looks like the video has stopped, but it's him talking. But then he gave me permission to post it because I begged him.
Anyway, I'm probably the only person out here that's bailed out of one that close to the ground. I went to sleep in the flight engineer's seat, and he made a piss-poor landing and blew a tire. And it woke me up, and I thought, damn, we've had a mid-air collision. I didn't know where we were. And so, I raised this, lashed it up, jettisoned that hatch, rolled out that airplane on my back with my parachute. And when I hit the ground, I was looking up at that purple map light moving up there. And I had already busted the little chute that pulls the big chute out. Anyway, there I was laying there on the ground. And I'm probably the only one that ever jumped out that close to the ground. Sir, I had to turn my parachute in, and they ragged me about that quite a bit.
Well, I think it's just the most precious story I've heard, and I thank you for sharing it and having a sense of humor about it.
Well, it's a pleasure to see this and to see something that still flies.
Thank you very much. It means a lot to us, and you can bet everybody back home is going to want to hear that praise from you, and I'll make sure they do.
Good, do that.
They've worked hard.
Yeah. And you can tell them you met the old dude that bailed out 3 feet off the ground.
And lived to tell about it.
Absolutely. Not real proud of it, but he lived.
So it's a good way to end out hearing about that POG plus 3. And I also wanted to point out that it matters to these veterans that you guys volunteered here in keeping these aircraft flying. For all the reasons that you said, for all those people. Then I won't distract the service. I wish I had 3 hours. Go to my house. I'll call you just like my family. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, that was just outstanding. Thank you so much, Rosh. So connections. So now we're going to go from some PBJ connections, and we're going to get back to D-Day, and we're going to talk about connections that we have, several of us, to that event. Mike, please.
Thank you, folks. My wife and I went to Normandy, the beaches, several years ago. Her daughter's in the Air Force. She was stationed in Italy at Aviano Air Base near Venice. And we went over to see her, being the good parents that we are. We went to see her in Italy and toured around a little bit. And I insisted, much to my wife's chagrin, on going to the Normandy beaches. A fairly big World War II history buff, and it was an important kind of a pilgrimage for me to go there and read about it for years and seen pictures and videos and films, etc., etc. I really wanted to go, and she was a pretty good sport. She agreed, okay, let's go. So we researched and said, okay, we can get a train out of Paris up to Cannes, which is the town quite close to the Normandy beaches. So we were all ready to go, and we're in Paris for a couple days, and the Paris French trains went on strike, surprise, surprise, so we couldn't go by the train. So we said, okay, what's plan B? So we got a bus tour, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really horrid. I just don't like bus tours in general. I don't like the time on the bus, and et cetera, et cetera. So we get on this bus, and there's a French lady that is the guide, historian, narrator, all three wrapped into one. And she started talking about her personal experience with Cannes and her family and the Normandy time. And it turns out her parents' home was occupied by the Germans for 4 years. They were virtual prisoners, enslaved to the Germans. And then when the Americans and the British and the Canadians came ashore on June 6th, she spoke of the whole experience as the liberation of France. She never used the word invasion. The Germans to her were the invaders. The Allies, the British and the Canadians and the Americans were the liberators. And she was eternally grateful for that. So I never really thought about liberation in those terms. I never heard that word used to associate it with the Normandy campaign. So this picture, I think, is pretty representative of what happened after the towns had been cleared of Germans and people were able to come out. So this picture, a period photograph, shows the local French people feeding the soldiers. I don't know if they're Americans or Canadians or British, doesn't make any difference. But they were so grateful that they had their lives back, they had their freedom. They were no longer under the thumb of the Nazis, and they were willing to give anything and everything they had to the soldiers that had brought them freedom. And I just found that very moving to realize how much it meant to them. And having this lady on the bus talk about her personal experiences was amazing. It was just, I was so grateful that the French trains were on strike. It just made for such a better experience. So this next picture is pretty touching. This young lady is placing flowers on a grave, freshly dug, obviously, dug by hand, probably by the local people, burying, again, killed soldiers of whatever country, doesn't make any difference. But this is how much it meant to them that they were willing to do these kind of labors. This was obviously something that was very important to them, to give these soldiers, the people that brought them freedom, okay, we're going to honor them, we're going to treat them with respect, etc., etc. So that was amazing. One of the other things I found amazing at the Normandy, the American cemeteries, these, I think it's 9,400 Americans that are buried there. They each have their white crosses that are perfectly preserved in this amazingly manicured lawn, green grass. And the grass is all cut by hand. There are no power tools that are used to keep that lawn perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And they cut it all by hand. They don't want to disrespect the soldiers and their memories with power tools, any kind of gasoline or electric or anything. It's all done by hand. And it's just, you can tell it's a labor of love. It's very moving. If you ever get the chance, please go. It'll be worth it. I mean, my wife, not history buff by a huge imagination. She stood on the cliffs and cried as we stood there and imagined 156,000 guys, and I say guys because it was all males in combat, 156,000 guys coming ashore in one day and liberating France. It was amazing. I just wanted to share that with everybody, so thank you.
Back to me. That's my father. The one on the left, sorry, it's a little bit grainy. Early to mid 70s, after his tour in Vietnam, commanding a helicopter squadron that inserted ground troops. I'll get a little better picture of him over here with my mom. That's a silver star on his chest. Third highest, right? Second are the service crosses for each of the services, and above that, the Medal of Honor. Well, that's my hero shot. I had a better hairstyle back then. I had hair. Late 90s, over in the Middle East, Desert Shield, preparing for Desert Storm. Now, my dad and I had long talk every Memorial Day and Veterans Day. But after I got back from Desert Storm, we continued talking every Memorial Day or Veterans Day. But here are two combat veterans, both aviators. And when we talked after I got back for nearly 20 years, we didn't talk about his bravery inserting ARBN troops into Quang Tri and taking fire from a hot LC, or me leading 100 airplanes into Baghdad's surface-to-air missile zone. We didn't talk about that. That's what we talked about. That bravery and courage and fear and the training and the mission and the got to do this for my buddy who's not next to me anymore. For 20 years. Okay, next up, last up, Gino, please.
As a very young boy in a one-room schoolhouse back in Nebraska, I remember hearing the older students repeating a World War I poem. In Flanders Field, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row and row. How many of you people had to memorize that when you were at school? That was taught in schools for many, many years. In later life, I was able to visit many of those national cemeteries where the crosses are row upon row of veterans that gave their life for our freedom. The first national cemetery I can recall visiting was Arlington, and then San Diego, Hawaii, the Philippines, Cambridge, England, and 5 years ago, Normandy. By the time we decided we wanted to go to Normandy, all the tours were booked, and there was a long waiting list. But I was finally able to get on a spot with the University of Concordia, Irvine. They were having an orchestra tour of Europe, and they had spaces available, and I knew that they were going to have a concert on the June 5th at Normandy, and on June 6th at Omaha Beach. I signed up, and it was a great adventure. Rob asked me to give you a few of my personal impressions, and there are so many stories to be told that I'm going to have to really be brief about it. And as far as pictures go, I have 1,400 pictures from that trip, but I'm only going to show you 8. So if I show you all of them, we'll miss lunch for sure. So the first impression was that the French government and the French people will never forget that the Allied invasion liberated France. And throughout the countryside, there were houses, businesses flying all Allied flags. And I didn't mention that I flew into Paris several days before the orchestra arrived, and that gave me time to take a private tour over to Normandy. And that was a great experience. Did the cemetery, did Utah Beach, did Pointe du Hoc, and all the countryside with all the hedgerows in it. The other impression is that many people were dressed in military uniform. I've never seen so many people in Allied and American uniforms. And they were camped out along the roadsides. They were camped out in the cities as you go through in parks. And then the other impression was, never ever have I seen so much American military equipment in one place. The place is packed with jeeps and trucks and amphibious vehicles and big guns, rifles, field kitchens, you name it, and they have it. And when walking in Pointe du Hoc, it was so impressive to see the 100-foot cliffs that the Rangers had to climb, facing the brutality of all the machine gun fire and heavy armament that was fortified up on the ridge. That was just an amazing place to see. So those were some of my visual impressions. But the other impressions can be summed up in 3 words: duty, courage, and sacrifice. At breakfast on June 5th, the director of the orchestra advised me that I had been selected to lay a wreath after the concert, and I was stunned and honored and very humbled to do that. To just walk on those hallowed grounds is a very emotional event. On June 6th at Omaha Beach, they had a concert. We were bused a mile away from the concert area, and we participated in a march a mile along Omaha Beach back to the concert area. And that was an exciting thing to do, because in the parade were universities. The University of Florida marching band was there. Other high school bands were there. Local people, military vehicles were just everywhere. It was a marvelous thing. And then we looked into the sky when we heard it, and there was That's All Brother leading 12 other C-47s that had flown over there. And they made several passes across Omaha Beach while we were there. And on the final day, it was great to see the old monument at Omaha Beach and the new monument at Omaha Beach. And they were still standing at water's edge when we left. And that That's just some trip to be remembered. If you ever get a chance to go to Normandy, please go. I'm not recommending necessarily that you go on these anniversary dates because it's very crowded. You will not see all those places in one day. But if you go separately and take advantage of some local tours, private tours, I didn't do the bus tour either. I hired a car and a guide, and it was just a marvelous experience.
Let's wrap things up. Again, I'm going to read this again, just the importance of D-Day. We want to commemorate this. According to this military historian, the largest enterprise ever undertaken by human beings. That's a pretty bold and profound statement. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Gino.
I forgot to mention, I have bottles of sand from Omaha Beach and Utah. If you'd like to come up and see it, $1 each. Please come up and have it.
Thank you guys very much. We're going to open the door and see the pool. Thank you very much.